afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us for our Wednesday webinar. It's the last few of these for the year, and it's only October, but we are kind of leaning in towards the end of the year, and I think it makes the topic today very apt. As Ashley and I were just chatting, we all kind of feel like we might just be hanging on a little bit, and burnout is a buzzword at the moment, and it's part of what Ashley's going to touch on today. But we are very privileged to have Ashley Cater with us, who is a registered counseling psychologist and the co-founder of the Mental Wellbeing Partners program. She specializes in things that resonate with all of us: workplace mental health, helping individuals and teams prevent that burnout, helping to build resilience, and setting healthy boundaries. And I think all of those will play a part in what she touches on today. And Ashley is also one of our very popular and highly rated Strove Network psychologists, and available for consultations with her via the app if you are interested in chatting more and getting some support in any way. Today, she's speaking about the approval trap and how people pleasing can lead to that burnout. So, Ashley, over to you. Really looking forward to today's session.
Thank you so much, Adrian, and hello, everybody. It's really a really exciting time of the year for me because I love to get to speak about mental health, and my goal in life is really to make it relatable and understandable. And Mental Health Awareness Month, which is October, is generally my busiest time to really spread the message around mental health. I think for me, it's important to remember that mental health is for everyone. We all have mental health, and it really kind of just varies on a scale, on a spectrum. So when you think about your mental health, when you think about burnout, when you think about all of those things, I want you to think about how you feel internally, but how you feel internally on a sliding scale. So I'm going to say between 1 and 10. You know, there are days when I wake up and my mental health is at a 2, and I think, oh, not another day. How badly do I need my job? I just want to sleep. And there are days when I feel great. There are days when I feel like I'm an 8 or a 9 and things are really great. And so it's important to acknowledge that there is often a fluctuation in our mental health, depending on the day, depending on what's happening in your life, depending on the year, and where you are, and even in the year. So this time of the year is often quite hectic. So as was said, my name is Ashley, and I come to you in 3 different capacities. 1, as a registered psychologist. Number 2, as a recovering people pleaser. And number 3, as a 3-time burnout veteran. That being said, that even in my own personal capacity, I have struggled with burnout before, and I am certainly a recovering people pleaser. Interestingly enough, when I was putting together today's presentation, I started quite a while ago, and the people pleaser in me had this desire to do the perfect presentation, to do it well, to do it way beyond time. And then there was part of me that was feeling like I'm actually kind of burned out. I do multiple things. So I have my own practice. I do some consultations for Strove. I also do consultations for 2 hospitals. And realistically, just couldn't do it in the way that I had originally planned. So I also had to wrestle with the people pleaser in me in putting together this presentation, and to remind myself what my capacity is, when I need to get it done by, and how I can kind of conserve my energy knowing that I have all of these things on my plate. So for me, really, it's around speaking to you as a professional, but also someone who has been through burnout before and is constantly trying to grow and evolve and kind of work on myself. So the chat function is open. So if there are any questions, please feel free to pop those in the chat. I'm going to make sure that I leave some time at the end to answer the questions. If there's anything that pops up, if I do keep looking down, it's because my iPad is here. So I can also see the questions as they come. So if there's something that speaks to what I'm speaking about, I will also answer those questions. And then I am going to ask you a couple of questions too. So I guess I want to start with the first one, which is, what is burnout? And you can pop some thoughts in the chat, any kind of words that come to mind for you when you hear the big B word, which is burnout. And I think for me, it's always important to get a group understanding of what burnout is. I know it looks different to everyone, but burnout is quite a multi-layered phenomenon. So I'd love to hear a little bit from you guys. What is burnout? What words come to mind when you think about burnout? Okay. So I'm seeing losing motivation and energy, feeling drained, struggling to focus, overwhelmed, man down or woman down. Yep. When you feel done, spent, gatful, one of my favorite South Africanisms. I was away for my birthday a couple months ago and I said that word and everyone was like, what? And I had to stop and think, how do I explain this in English to someone who isn't South African? Flat battery, not wanting to come to work, see detachment, survival mode for too long, absolutely. Fatigue. So I'm seeing a lot around like just feeling just depleted in energy, feeling like you are spent, that your battery is on low power mode, just like my phone battery is on right now. Losing control of emotions when coffee doesn't help. Yep, although I'm not sure coffee helps me that much anymore as I get older. Yeah, irritable, on autopilot. So really, you guys have captured it really well. It's really this feeling of just being low. So I want to give you just the general definition of what burnout is. So burnout is not when we think about let's say, psychologist, there are specific mental health conditions that you can be diagnosed with. So depression is one of them. There's different anxiety disorders. Burnout is not necessarily a diagnosis per se. It is what we call an occupational phenomenon. So it's a thing that we experience. Now, the reason why at present it's not a diagnosis is because it can also overlap with some of these other diagnoses. So it can fall into the realm of depression. In terms of symptoms, it can fall into the realm of some of the anxiety disorders. So just to keep that in mind. So essentially, burnout is a state of emotional, mental, and physical exhaustion. So just holistic exhaustion caused by prolonged or excessive stress, particularly around unmanaged workplace stress. So very much in the workplace realm, but it does impact other areas of your life. Okay. And there are a couple of things that are clear indicators of burnout. There are a range of other symptoms, as I said, but it is characterized by a feeling of being drained. So even when you're getting enough sleep, you're exhausted mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, just in every way possible. There is an increased mental distance from your job. So you feel quite cynical and negative about your job. It's that feeling of, ugh, again, really? And then the third thing is around reduced professional efficacy. So it is making it harder to get your job done. Okay. So that's an important thing to remember. Now, when we think about the recipe for burnout, and I experience this with both the clients that I work with, but as well as in my own burnout story, is often when we think about burnout, we think about high workload, high demands. It feels like it's never ending, too much to do, too little time. We think about feeling like we have a lack of control in terms of how we get our work done. We feel like there's poor reward and recognition, so that makes us feel less fulfilled in the job that we do. Insufficient support, and that links again to relationships, and particularly in the workplace, relationships also paint a picture or influence how we experience our workplace, particularly with our team, as well as with the person that we directly report to. So that's how we conceptualize burnout. However, there is also another layer of it, and that is the internal stuff. So what I just mentioned is the external stuff that influence burnout or higher risk of getting burnt out. Then there is also the internal stuff. So the stuff that is happening inside of us. Those are things like our personality traits. So things like I have a slight tendency to be type A and a little bit of a perfectionist. Things like one of the things we're going to speak about today is people pleasing. And that also links to the next one, which is really our cognitive and emotional patterns, the ways in which we think about things, which impact the ways in which we do things. Often when we think about, maybe you guys have heard of CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy, we talk about a triangle that impacts us. It is your thoughts, impact your feelings, impact your behaviors. So there's a link there, right? And then also the things that we do to cope and regulate. So what is our coping generally? How do we cope with our mental health? How do we cope with stress, etc.? Now, why it's important for me to put this recipe for burnout is because there's an interplay between the external stuff and the internal stuff. And when we're thinking about recovery from burnout, and maybe I'll share a little bit about my story when I used to work in corporate a long time ago when I first experienced burnout, is that it is important to think about what are the things that are contributing to my burnout. I use the word recipe because if I asked you, what is the recipe to make chicken curry, for all intents and purposes, there might be some staples like chicken and rice, but there might be different spices that people add to their specific chicken curry, right? Same thing when it comes to burnout. It's always important to be able to think about external and internal ingredients that's contributing to where you're at. Even beyond burnout, when you think about mental health, wherever you are on that scale between 1 to 10, what are the things that are contributing to where you're at a particular point in time? Okay, so then my next question to you is, obviously we're speaking just specifically around people pleasing as one of the recipes that increase your risk of burnout. So if you could probably put some thoughts in the chat around, then what is people pleasing? What would you say is people pleasing? What are the characteristics? What are the things that make up a people pleaser? What are the behaviors that people pleasers maybe have, even particularly in the workplace, seeing as we're speaking about burnout specifically? What is people pleasing? And you can't say pleasing people because it's a little bit deeper than that. Okay, so I see saying yes to all that's asked of you, agreeing to tasks you don't have time for, inability to say no, putting others ahead of yourself, yeah, taking on too much to avoid looking bad. I see lots around not being able to say no, always saying yes. I see boundaries, which is the other big B word, which is always so important. So boundaries. And when we think about boundaries, I want you to also think about that there are several different kinds of boundaries. There are emotional boundaries, there's time boundaries, there's physical boundaries, there's intellectual boundaries around the things that we talk about. So there's a lot of different boundaries that can come into play here. Okay. I see prioritizing needs of others above your own due to fear of rejection or criticism, fear of disappointing others, okay, being afraid to voice your own opinion, fixation on making everyone happy no matter whether it actually makes them happy or whether it makes you happy, yeah, caring what others think about you, putting others' happiness above your own, believing that boundaries means failing people, doing everything for everyone all the time. There's a movie that I watched a while ago. It's called Everything Everywhere All at Once. Kind of sums that up. Yeah. Avoiding conflict. Absolutely. So you guys are pretty spot on. There are a lot of different attributes that make up people pleasing. And again, I always speak about a continuum of everything. We're going to think about people pleasing on a continuum too. Okay. So essentially, just so that we are all on the same page, people pleasing is really a pattern of behavior characterized so holistically as prioritizing the needs of others over your own. I do just want to have a little asterisk here, a little disclaimer. If you notice any grammar or spelling issues, please excuse me. That's the people pleaser in me that's getting a little bit anxious about that, but yeah, bear with me. So really, yeah, prioritizing everyone else's needs, everyone else's wants, everyone else's asks of you over your own. And this is not just a sometime thing, it's a often thing. So everyone else is important and you are like number zero on the priority. Like you are like last place. And there's some key psychological aspects, and I will get a little bit more of the meat of the psychology behind it. But really, it's about a need for external validation. And again, we all do often enjoy external validation, but this is when there is an absolute need for it, because there is no internal validation from yourself. So all your validation needs to come from other people, and you're really searching for that. There is, people mentioned it earlier, this fear of conflict or disapproval or disappointing others. Part of it is also about suppressing yourself. So suppressing who you really are, how you really feel, what you really want, also how you want to do things. And then another part of it is often it can be rooted in a really low self-esteem, a low self-worth, and just general feelings of inadequacy. So you use the people pleasing to feel like you're trying to be adequate because you don't feel adequate in yourself. Okay. So what I thought was really important is to show that people pleasing has two masks. It can often be the thing that you portray to others versus what's actually happening behind the scenes. The things that we say and how we react to others versus what's really going on inside of us. So a little bit of the what you see versus what you get. So what you might see from others and what you might portray to others is you're super helpful. You're always on the ball. You're like ready to help everyone. You're very attentive, so you notice and you pick up people's needs, you pick up their wants, and often without them needing to even ask. You can come across as easygoing. I got this. Don't worry. Sorted. Very hardworking. You come across as flexible, and sometimes, obviously, that's to the detriment of yourself. Laid back, polite. People might consider you very considerate and very caring. So often there's quite a externally facing positive kind of characteristic to it. You look at somebody, you're like, geez, they're so considerate, they're so helpful, so flexible, so caring, so considerate. Sounds amazing, right? Because that's how a people pleaser wants to seem, wants to appear. But what's actually happening below the surface is really this inability to set boundaries. And you guys mentioned boundaries earlier. So struggling with boundaries. Again, people mention you saying yes when you actually want to say no. What often happens is because people are constantly overstepping your boundaries and you're allowing them, you get this sense of resentment. And resentment is quite an interesting emotion, because resentment is not necessarily just anger. Quite easy to be angry at someone. Ashley was really rude to me and I don't like her. Resentment is a little bit more complex. You are angry at the other person, but you're also angry at yourself for consistently allowing it. So that's where the resentment comes in. There might be a sense of anxiety, a sense of exhaustion. Again, this is where the burnout is coming out. Internally, there's this deeply rooted fear of rejection, this deeply rooted fear of punishment, of negative consequences, even if that's like criticism, or maybe being passed up for a promotion, or just people not liking you. And for people that are people pleasers, that's really hard for them. Like it feels like an existentially impossible thing for people not to like them and approve of them. There's a fear of conflict. You deny your own needs. It often leads to kind of misrepresenting yourself and your capacity. So you're at this time of year and your capacity is like really low, but you're like, no, got this. Meantime, inside, you're like, I don't have this. It can also result in an inability to ask for help, an inability to say, I've reached my capacity, can someone help me? Again, low self-worth, and this is linked to a negative self-image, this view of yourself as not good enough, as a range of negative self-beliefs. And because of that, you're also incredibly critical on yourself. You watch every single thing that you do. You read and reread and rewrite that email, and then you put it into AI, and then you still reread it before you send it to people. So it's because you're being so critical and hard on yourself. So This is just a little bit of tongue-in-cheek slide, but I thought it was really relatable because I know that some of these things I say out loud and sometimes actually think something different. So these might be a little bit relatable to you. So what people pleasers may say out loud to others is, I don't mind, whatever works for you. Or I can take that on, no problem. Apologizing profusely, even for things that aren't your fault. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. There was load shedding. I'm so sorry. My colleague didn't get it to me in time, but I'm so sorry. I'll just do it quickly. I don't want to be a bother. If you're happy, I'm happy. I know you're busy, but don't worry, I can wait. I'll stay late and finish it. Don't worry. If I have to work until 4 a.m., I will. It's totally fine if we change the deadline again for the 17th time and bring it up. Okay, fine. I'll do the presentation. I don't want to let the team down. Don't worry, I've got it covered. Even when you don't. It's okay. I'll sort it out. Even after it was someone else that dropped the ball. Some of these might be a little relatable to you. But you might be thinking is, oh, if I say no, they'll think I'm reliable, or they'll think I'm not good at my job, or they'll think insert negative criticism. I can't disappoint anyone. They'll be annoyed if I speak up. I need them to like me. Conflict means I've done something wrong. I'm not allowed to rest until everyone else is sorted. If I don't handle it perfectly, I'll lose their respect. I don't deserve the promotion unless everyone agrees. If I assert myself, they'll think I'm being difficult. So these are just some of the things that just show how different you can portray yourself versus what's really going on internally. And there's a disconnect. And that disconnect is what often fuel that exhaustion, that emotional exhaustion of trying to appear to be something that is so far removed to how you're really feeling. So just a little bit around the psychology of approval seeking. And now remember, this might not resonate with everyone. Not everything will resonate with everyone, but I think it's always helpful to understand where does it come from? Where does that approval seeking come from? So the first thing, and there's a couple of factors here. The first thing is there's really this core need for acceptance, because acceptance feels like safety. So approval seeking in this instance is really like a survival strategy. It often comes from things that we experience growing up. And often it's because we maybe grew up in environments where things like love, stability, validation, safety felt conditional. So you felt like you only got those things if you were good, if you were polite, if you did the right thing for everyone else. Or if you were criticized quite a lot, or if you grew up in an environment where things were a little bit unpredictable, you didn't know what you were going to get on a different day. So in order to survive that, you felt like I need to make nice. I need to make sure that everyone else is okay so that it feels safer and calmer for me internally. And remember, we're talking about internal stuff here, okay? So you felt you needed to be good, helpful, easy to get along with. Perhaps you grew up learning that conflict or disapproval led to some sort of punishment, abandonment, rejection. And then because of that, you associated other people's happiness with a feeling of safety and security. So you felt if other people weren't happy around you, you actually felt like your nervous system was dysregulated, like there was anxiety. You felt like survival, this is not safe. So I need to make sure everyone else around me is happy so that I can regulate myself and feel safe emotionally. The next thing is around self-worth. So this is when your self-worth is externally anchored. Important thing that I often like to tell people is there is a slight difference between self-worth and self-esteem. Self-esteem is a little bit more, I guess, fluid and a little bit more externally based. So yes, I feel good about myself when I've done a great webinar and I've gotten great feedback. Cool. Yes, I would feel good about myself if I won the lottery right now. Great. Whereas self-worth is more anchored and ingrained in how we see our intrinsic value as a human being outside of those external things. So I'll use a lottery example. Yes, I would feel fabulous if I won the lottery right now. But whether I win the lottery or not, if my self-worth is good, I believe in my intrinsic value despite winning the lottery or not. I believe in my intrinsic value, whether this webinar goes well or not. Yes, I'll feel bad about the webinar, but I'm not necessarily going to feel bad about myself and that my value has dropped if the webinar doesn't go quite well. If I can just give you those examples. So this is where you are. So people pleasers, your self-worth is very externally anchored and often comes from you got inconsistent validation, and then you believe that you constantly need to prove your worth as a person. Now, proving your worth as a person is not necessarily the same as proving your skill as a person, right? So it's that I need to do everything for everyone all the time to prove that I am worth something as me. The flip side of the coin is then you actually never feel like you're worth something as you. You feel like there's always another thing you need to prove that you have value. Okay. You do this in order to feel enough because you don't feel enough in yourself. So there's a dependence on others to tell you that you're enough. And what that happens is then there's this identity fusion, is where you define yourself by how others perceive you or by others need you. Now, I think that feedback from others is always important, and sometimes it's helpful to take it from where it comes from and take what you need and take what's true to you. And some of it you're like, they don't really know me, so I'm going to kind of discard that. But there should still be this very solid sense of self, regardless of kind of what other people think about you. And here there's a fusion. So whatever people think or need from you, that's your view of yourself. Again, there's this conditional self-esteem. So on the condition that you help everyone, you kind of feel okay about yourself on the condition that you are everything for everyone all the time, all at once. And linked to this, which kind of fuels the cycle, is this excessive feeling of guilt and shame. Now, again, distinction between guilt and shame. I often say guilt is I failed at something. Shame is I am a failure. Again, self-esteem versus self-worth. More of the external versus the internal and who I am. People mentioned this earlier, so I'm not going to go too much into it, but really there's this fear of rejection and abandonment. And it feels more than just unpleasant, because I know we all want people to like us and approve of us, but this is more than just unpleasant. It feels like an existentially threatening thing if someone doesn't like you or someone's not happy with you. And this makes you over vigilant about other people's needs, comfort, moods. And as soon as there's a shift in the air, you feel this anxiety to do something about it. And you manage closeness by trying to please people and accommodate people. And it's kind of what we would put in the bracket of anxious attachment. So in order to foster connection with people, instead of just feeling like you can connect as yourself, you feel like you need to constantly please people and accommodate people in order to feel connected to people, because your nervous system registers disconnection as a danger, as a threat. There is then also this splitting of your good and your bad self, and there's almost this overactive good self. So there's this, you need to overdevelop the good sides of you and the compliance sides of you, while suppressing what you deem as the bad side of you, the anger, the need, the authenticity, the resentment. Now, what we know is we're all integrated beings. We have parts of us that are, in inverted commas, good. We have parts of us that are challenging, but that's what makes us who we are. And the problem with doing that is then we sometimes struggle to recognize what we actually need or feel. And the big thing that happens is sometimes we say, oh, I'm exhausted, when actually we're not just exhausted. It's actually that it's resentment disguised as exhaustion, because you have this constant internal battle that's going on, this invisible workload. Essentially what it is it's short-term relief at a long-term cost. You feel anxiety, you seek approval, you receive some praise sometimes, you feel safe, and that calms your anxiety briefly. You lose that external validation, and then you need more internal improvement, and that links to that links to the burnout and the resentment, and fuels it and fuels it and fuels it. Okay, so essentially the eternal rules that people pleasers live by is always say yes, work first and my needs second, never let anyone see you struggle, praise equals safety, other people's comfort matters more than my well-being, and I must earn my place every single day. So I just want to take a couple of seconds for you to think about recognizing your own approval patterns. If you have a pen with you, these are not questions that you have to answer because they are quite personal. I want to take a minute just to get some questions out there for you to start to think about your own approval patterns. So how often do I say yes when I actually mean no? When I agree to something, do I check in with my needs or the expectations of others first? In what ways do I adjust my tone, opinions, or behavior to avoid conflict? When I receive praise or appreciation, how long does the good feeling last? How do I usually react when someone seems disappointed or upset with me? What do I fear might happen if I disappoint someone? Whose approval feels the most important to me and why? Do I equate being liked with being worthy? Did I learn growing up that love or safety depend on being good, helpful, or agreeable? What parts of myself do I hide to keep others comfortable? How do I feel after saying yes when I didn't want to? What emotions do I suppress most often? How has people pleasing affected my stress level, time, or relationships? What do I resent but rarely express? Where in my life do I feel invisible or taken for granted? And I want you to think of this continuum, love a continuum. On the one side, it's I shape myself entirely around others on the one end. And on the other end, it's I honor my needs and the needs of others equally. And when thinking about this continuum, I want you to think about on most days, where would I place myself on this line? So on one end, shaping myself entirely around others. On the other end, I honor my needs and others equally. In which situations do I move closer to one end or the other? Because it also can be different. What signs tell me I've gone too far into people pleasing mode? And then what would balanced care look like for me? Caring for others without losing myself entirely. So I know that those were quite a few questions, but if there were any that stood out for you, I always say if something stands out for you, there's something there. There's something important to really reflect on and to think about. Again, thoughts, feelings, behaviors. How is it manifesting in my life? Where is it manifesting in my life? And where would I like it to shift? So I think I've mentioned this, so I'm just going to skim over it, but really, I spoke about that people pleasing links to burnout because you just, this constant overextension. So you're feeling completely emotionally depleted. You kind of ignore your own body's warning signs. Because you're avoiding conflict all the time, you're literally creating invisible workloads in your mind and emotion. So that's exhausting you too. And burnout it's not just physical fatigue. It feels like you're betraying yourself. And over time, you feel like you lose your meaning. You feel empty because you're constantly betraying yourself and your needs. And if you go back to our original definition, key features of burnout. Again, perfectionism and guilt fuel the burnout cycle. So you constantly overworking and overperforming and overcommitting. Even when you recognize that I'm really burnt out, you don't allow yourself to say, I'm at capacity. You recognize it like for a moment, and then you push through it. And you constantly push through it, and you constantly push through it, and you constantly push through it. And I think the other thing that's important to notice is that, I think that sometimes workplaces unintentionally reward or notice self-sacrificing behaviors. They notice, remember when we talked about how people present versus what's actually going on inside, they notice the external. They notice someone that seems helpful, that seems accommodating, that seems hardworking. They don't always see the thing that's happening beyond the surface. And the thing that's happening beyond the surface is the thing that fuels burnout. So just briefly before I take any questions, I think it's important to remember that when I think about mental health and how to work on your mental health, there's proactive and there's a reactive. Difference, proactive is you water your plants even when they're not dying in order to keep them growing. Reactive is there's a fire, we need to put it out. So even with burnout, it's about thinking about what are the reactive stuff that I need to work on if I'm already struggling, and what are the proactive stuff. Obviously, one of the big reactive things is things around taking some time off, things around seeking professional help. I fully believe in it, not just because I am a psychologist, but I also have my own psychologist. And if you do already have Strove, you can use the talk function. There's a range of amazing professionals that you can access that service for. If you can't, you can access it through your medical aid. You can access it privately. There are ways to go about it. There are also places that do offer pro bono services. Proactive is the stuff of how do I continue to grow my mental health and continue to grow as a person. So just briefly, I think for me, it's important. 4 things are important in breaking the cycle of people pleasing. It's important to learn your emotional boundaries. Remember, I say your because it is individual to you. Mine are going to be different to yours. It's about connecting or reconnecting with your intrinsic motivation. And it's about learning to tolerate other people's disappointments. You will disappoint people all the time. That's just the nature of life. There will be people that don't like you. There'll be people that struggle. It's okay to do that. And then it's about building that internal validation and self-worth. For me, it's that massive, deep shift between I'm valuable because I please others to I'm valuable even when I rest, say no, or disappoint someone. I am still valuable. So it's the same as I'm only valuable if this webinar goes really well and there's raving reviews in the comments. From that to I'm valuable regardless of how the webinar goes or how people perceive me or the webinar. Okay. So reconnect with your why, and the why that is you. Things to think about is what really matters to you when no one's watching. What would you do if you knew you couldn't disappoint anyone? When taking something in, or taking something on, rather, typo, ask yourself, am I doing this from a place of fear or freedom? Practice doing less and feeling more. So schedule some time where you're not being productive. I know we live in a very capitalistic society and there's a very big view of that we always need to be productive. Sometimes it's okay to be okay and not be overly productive. It's also about redefining productivity. For me, it's not just about output. We need to move from output to alignment, focusing on the things that actually align with me, who I am as a person, how I want to do things, what I want to work on. Understanding that there are those things that I have to do, like admin, that don't really like it, but maybe I can do it in a way that's more aligned to when it works for me and how it works for me. Relearn internal permission, which means giving yourself permission to say I'm at capacity, giving myself permission to rest before I am burnt out, giving myself permission to realize that my best looks different on different days. It's important to cultivate self-compassion and curiosity. So don't be so hard on yourself. Shift from what should I do to what do I feel drawn to do, or how do I feel drawn to do it? And then remember that comparison is the thief of all joy. When we're comparing ourselves to the next person, we're putting unrealistic expectations on ourselves. So just some final questions to think about how to grow towards authenticity. What would it look like if I trusted my own approval first? How might it feel to disappoint someone and still be okay? What's one small low stakes no I could practice saying this week? What kind of relationships do I want to build if I stop earning connection through pleasing others? And how can I start showing up as my full authentic self even when it feels risky? This is just a quote that I absolutely love. It says, when you say yes to others, make sure you're not saying no to yourself. And I think for me, that's important. It doesn't mean that you always have to say no, but it's about it's about considering what other people need, but also what you need. And the last thing I'll say to you is, I was out socially the other day, because I think we all often define ourselves very much by our job. And even though your job is important to you, it's what you do, it's not who you are. And someone actually asked me, I met them socially out, and they asked me, what do you do for a living? And my response was, my best. Because that's what it is. That's what Ashley does for a living. She does her best. And that her best looks different on different days. And so it's also important to give yourself permission to remember that your best does look different on different days. And even if your job is important to you, it is not the entirety of who you are. Okay. So I am going to, I guess, end there. I don't know if there's any questions.
Thanks, Ashley, and you certainly brought your best for us today. That was an epic session. I don't think we had a single person drop off because everyone was engaged. The numbers have stayed exactly the same, and the feedback in the chat has been super. Guys, if you want to pop any questions into the chat, we've got a few minutes to post them to Ashley. Actually, I've actually got two for you myself, just to get it started, if you don't mind.
Sure.
The first one, I actually want to challenge you on something you said. We're making use of services as an individual, like, yourself, a counselor or a coach, being reactive. Do you think it's actually more of a role as well to use it proactively when you sort of reflecting on these things and you trying to learn a bit more, before you reach burnout, looking for help instead?
Absolutely. I think I actually started using services proactively because I wanted to learn a little bit more about myself. And I think that people can use it in two different ways. Often the entryway, people only go when they want to be reactive, but there's so much that you can use the space for, in terms of also just taking a look at yourself and your life and reflecting in a private, confidential space. I always say to my clients that we use the space however you would like to. So even if right now you're really burnt out and you want some help, there's also so much that we can learn and grow, and learning and growth and being proactive about our mental health, our relationships, our lives, I think is so important. So I'm glad you highlighted that.
I saw Brandon had messaged, he'd asked just about the slides and the questions that you'd been posting, because they were an opportunity for some deep reflection. So just to let everyone know, we are going to post the video again after this, but I think that speaks to Ashley's point there as well, as taking that time to reflect on those questions. It'll be eye-opening for, I think, many of us. We may or may not have thought we were people pleasers before this session. Our opinion might have changed a little bit as we went through it, but there's going to be a different journey for everyone. Brandon asks here, how do you think you can be compassionate without being people pleasing? Where do you kind of go, what's the junction from being compassionate to then taking it too far, and how do you fit that in?
Sure. This is where everyone says you must be very empathetic, but then sometimes too much empathy becomes your downfall, because the important thing is that it's not about losing compassion for others. It's about also gaining compassion for yourself. That's where the balance is. The problem is when we just have compassion for others and we just have empathy for others and we don't have it for ourselves.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
It does, definitely. So Kavita also mentioned sort of a self-care routine. I think that's going to be quite valuable in pulling a little bit more of this towards yourself, developing a consistent self-care routine to help maintain that balance and grounding.
Sure. So for me, there's so many things that are self-care, but I also think it's about remembering that you are an individual and you are unique. And so you need to try different things that work for you. I have a couple of things that I think are really helpful when I'm working out my own self-care plan. So it's a couple of words. It's reflect, connect, reflect, refresh, connect, nourish, move. 5 words. Find something that falls in each of those. So reflect, refresh, connect, nourish, and move. And if you can do something that falls into each of these, then that is a great basis for your self-care. I also think it's important to really reflect honestly on where you are at, because sometimes your self-care needs change. So I'll tell you, my personal morning reflection is I ask myself 3 questions. Where am I really at today on that scale of 1 to 10? Not what I want to show everyone else, but like, where am I really at? What are my needs, and what can I do today to intentionally meet those needs? Because that changes. You know, some days what I need is I'm going to actually need to sleep early today because I'm actually exhausted. Some days what I need is alone time, and I kind of need everyone in my life to leave me alone for a little bit. Some days what I need is to go out in nature, to connect with people that I care about. So for me, that real reflection of the 3 questions, where am I really at? What are my needs? And what can I do today to intentionally meet those needs has been kind of a game changer for me in terms of my self-care.
Lovely. And we're getting a lot of thank yous in the chat, just as a few people would drop off. That's okay, everybody. But just, a last question, perhaps a bit more from my side and looking at it a little bit differently. But we've chatted about sort of the individual in this instance. Do you also feel that there's, organizational sort of culture and a role for us to play at a sort of broader level, that we can be more aware of these kinds of things, we can put processes in place, or try and, improve, the culture so that we can support and facilitate this better?
Absolutely. When I think about an organization, those are the external things outside of the individual. And it's kind of, I look at it as like an organizational level. So that's the things like the culture, the policies, having really good systems and proactive and reactive systems in place. Then I also think the managerial level plays a massive level and a massive impact in terms of an employee experience. So when we're thinking about managers, I think it's always important to look at what is the team culture that you are creating, because there's a culture of the organization, but then there's also the culture of the team or the department that can often be different. And managers play a critical role in terms of that. So really, when we're thinking about an organization and starting to shift an organization around mental well-being, we think about individual, managerial, and I'm going to put HR in there as well, and then the organization as a whole. I think that there is so much that we can do. And often when I say organizational culture, people don't know what that often means. And I say, well, it's the way things are done around here. That's what the organizational culture is. And I know that as organizations, we think about mental health as just depression, anxiety, all of those things. But we need to start to think about mental health as just generally how people feel and how people experience the workplace, and showing up for them in the moments that matter. Everything from when they're being recruited to when they're being onboarded to when there's changes in their life, changes in where they are in the organization, and starting to look at just the overall employee experience on a day-to-day, but as well as in the moments that matter. And I think that there's incredible work that is being and can be done in that space.
Super. And perhaps a nice seed planted for a follow-up session at some stage, sort of organizational culture and how we can impact things at a broader level. Ashley, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for everyone, your questions, your feedback, everything that you've put in there. We did post the link, if you guys wouldn't mind completing the form for some feedback on the session, to know if you liked it, or propose any other topics for us. You don't have to put your people-pleasing hat on for that. So just give us some honest reviews is great. And we will post a recording. Yeah, exactly. Ashley, thank you so much for your time. There were some questions about getting in touch with you. For those of you who've got access to talk, you can do that there, or via perhaps an email address. And I think 1 or 2 organizations who might want to just reach out and have a session with you as well. So it's great to see the interest coming across. Ashley, thank you very much. And to everyone else who's joined us today, thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.